Now, as we observed in the video, moral and political issues might be brought up in the workplace. But more often, our young ones, even very young ones, are confronted with these same topics. How will they respond? Are your young ones ready? As you watch the next video, notice how Olivia defends Jehovah's righteous standards.
Great discussion today, everyone. Remember, midterms are this Friday. No excuses. That includes you, Jordan. You were noticeably silent during our discussion today, Olivia.
I was. I guess I just didn't have much to say.
Aren't you concerned about gay rights?
Well, it seems like a political issue, and I stay neutral when it comes to political stuff.
But it's not a political issue. This is a human rights issue.
Hey, Mr. Dallas, she's like crazy religious.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, you don't understand. Jehovah's Witnesses hate everybody that isn't straight.
That's not true. We don't hate anyone.
I've spoken with your people before. They seem big on equality.
We are. The Bible says God isn't partial, so we believe that everyone should be treated fairly.
Good. So I assume you have gay members in your church?
No, we don't.
But I thought you just said everyone should be treated equal. I'm confused.
Ah, called it.
Jordan, don't you have a class to get to? As I was saying, how is that not a little hypocritical? Saying that you love everyone and then excluding certain people.
Honestly, Mr. Dallas, I've wondered the same thing.
Okay. And?
Well, I researched it in the Bible, and I realized that God accepts all people, but he doesn't accept all conduct.
What does that mean?
It means that you can't be abusing drugs, you can't be stealing, or being violent and still be a witness. There's just certain actions that God just doesn't accept.
We're watching the latest example of the propaganda crusade that is being waged by Jehovah's Witnesses against the LGBTQ plus community. They are obsessed with making gay people feel isolated, feel abnormal, feel as though there is something wrong with them, feel marginalized. And this video is training young Jehovah's Witnesses on how to project the bigoted, narrow-minded views of the Jehovah's Witness theology in the classroom. Because let's remember, when you are a young Jehovah's Witness, the classroom is your territory. You're even told when you're young, we can't go into your school to preach. We're forbidden from doing so, but you're in there. You're attending classes, so it's effectively your territory. You shouldn't just be treating school as somewhere that you learn stuff. It shouldn't just be about receiving an education. You're going there to educate others. You're going there to even educate your teacher. And that's what we're seeing here. Now, so much was standing out for me in this dramatization. I'm going to narrow it down to just a couple of things I wanted to comment on. You'll see the clip where the teacher says,
So I assume you have gay members in your church?
No, we don't.
No, we don't. We don't have gay members in our church. This was interesting for me. It actually skipped past me the first time I watched it. And then I watched it again just now while filming. And it struck me that what you often hear Jehovah's Witnesses say is that it's okay to be gay. We accept people who are gay. You're just not allowed to be a practicing gay. So it's okay to be attracted to members of the same sex, which is what a gay person is, someone who is attracted to the same sex. You're just not allowed to act on it, which is, of course, just ridiculous thinking. Imagine telling a heterosexual person, you're allowed to be attracted to the opposite sex, you're just not allowed to act on it. Well, what you're saying is effectively, you're not allowed to be who you are. You're not allowed to love freely and express your love freely to people that you're attracted to. So it's interesting that this propaganda, in addition to schooling young people on how to be unbearable in the classroom, it's also kind of sneaking in a message from the governing body that this isn't an answer that Jehovah's Witnesses should be giving. Oh, it's okay, you're allowed to be gay, you're just not allowed to act on it. I'm kind of glad in a way that they've done this, because we all sort of knew that that's not how things are. But now, in future, whenever a Jehovah's Witness apologist tries to push this kind of trickery, we can just direct them to this video, where the writers of the script have very clearly made a statement clarifying their position that no, we do not have gay people in the Jehovah's Witness religion. Thanks for being so clear and out there and brazen in your homophobia, Watchtower or Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever you want to call yourselves, Jehovah's organization. And the other part, I guess the part that most infuriated me in this whole exchange, and while I can't speak for gay people because I don't know what it's like to be marginalized as a gay person, I can only imagine this part of the dialogue being so disgusting and so hateful and bigoted in their eyes. It's the part where Olivia says,
It means that you can't be abusing drugs, you can't be stealing or being violent and still be a witness. There's just certain actions that God just doesn't accept.
being gay is apparently an action comparable to drugs, taking drugs, stealing, and being violent. If you're gay, you're doing something as bad as all of those things. You might as well be on cocaine. You might as well be beating people up. You might as well be stealing. It's a crime. It's such an abomination that it can be spoken of in the same breath as all of those things. Just as this is supposed to be, let's remember, the model response that's to be given to outsiders. And the teacher is apparently supposed to swallow this. The teacher is supposed to come away thinking, oh yeah, wow, great point. Being gay, I guess, is a bit like taking drugs or stealing or being violent. What's interesting, though, is that even in Jehovah's Witness materials, it's obvious that porneia, or sexual immorality, which they would take to include homosexuality, is of far more significance and seriousness than doing drugs, stealing, and being violent. And I'll prove it to you. Here is, again, the Shepherd the Flock of God book. This is an elders-only manual, and I somehow managed to get an original, authentic copy. And if you go to chapter 12, it has a section determining whether a judicial committee should be formed. This is essentially, this chapter, the list of things that can get you disfellowshipped. And the section on drugs, I'll even show it to you, is one paragraph. It's misuse of tobacco or marijuana and abuse of medical, illicit, or addictive drugs. Maybe you can see there to the right, maybe you can see there the paragraph here on taking drugs. So it gets a paragraph, the offence, the wrongdoing of taking drugs. Now let's do stealing. Stealing actually straddles 2 pages, but I can tell you it's section 21, stealing, thievery, and it's 1 sentence. So drugs, 1 paragraph. Stealing, 1 sentence. How about violence? Let's do violence. Fits of anger, violence, domestic violence, and I'll show you the paragraphs. You can just about see them on this side, running down the page here. And for manslaughter, the paragraph just continues by a couple of lines on the next page. So that's how much material there is on violence in the Shepherd book. Sexual immorality, or porneia, 5.5 pages in chapter 12. 5.5 pages on what consenting adults do with each other. Granted, there is some mention of child abuse, but mostly it's to do with consenting adults. While drugs gets a single paragraph, violence gets 3 paragraphs, and stealing gets a single sentence. And by the way, the 5.5 pages we can add to if we include the entire chapter on pornography in this book. And if you want a summary of what it says on pornography, basically it's a slapped wrist if it's heterosexual pornography, and a potential disfellowshipping offence if it's gay pornography. You can tell it's straight people that wrote this, can't you? But how fixated this organisation is on sex. Sex is apparently the worst crime imaginable if you aren't married, or if your partner isn't someone you're married to, or is of the wrong gender. Meanwhile, actual crimes like theft or violence, murder even in the case of manslaughter, or taking drugs, we don't have much to say on that. So I found it incredibly disingenuous that Olivia in this dramatization likens being gay to these things here, when the organization's own publications indicate that they treat sexual immorality with far more seriousness than those other things. But imagine how isolated, how alone you're going to feel, how invalidated as a human being you're going to feel if you're watching this material as a gay person in the organization, particularly the young Jehovah's Witnesses or the children of Jehovah's Witness parents. It must drive them to despair.
There's just certain actions that God just doesn't accept.
Including how someone expresses their sexuality?
In some cases, yes. We follow God's standards, not having sex without being married.
Well, if that's how you feel, that's your right. Personally, it seems a tad archaic to me, but to each their own.
Hey. Does the Bible really say all that?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Maybe you could show me sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
So we can expect future installments in this saga.
Oh, goody. Let's hope they're as entertaining as what we've just seen. Again, where do we even start? Well, I think what we have here, as I've already mentioned about previous installments in this saga featuring Olivia, Gabe, and what's the name of the mum? Irene. As I've mentioned already, what we have here is evidence that the writers are not living in reality. So they've spent so long in this sheltered Jehovah's Witness bubble, especially the bubble of Bethel, that they don't know how real life works. They think that the arguments that they're giving in these videos, including the one we saw previously where Irene is confronted in the workplace, they think these are good answers to give, including conflating homosexuality with violence, drugs, and stealing. And they think that this is such a good answer that it's going to prompt a schoolmate who's listening in to walk up and say, hey, does the Bible really say all that? You know, I'm really digging this message of gay people being akin to drug addicts and thieves and violent people. That's sort of in line with what I think. I'm really attracted to the idea of learning more about how wrong being gay is and how we should anticipate the imminent destruction of all gay people. Yeah, that's really going to happen.
But did you notice how Olivia was able to defend Jehovah's righteous standards? She kept her peaceful spirit, didn't she? She acknowledged that she had the same question as the teacher, but she had done further research on the subject. And did you appreciate how she subtly showed that Jehovah's standards benefit both the individual and the community? As examples, she highlighted the avoidance of drug abuse and theft, values she knew her teacher would appreciate. Parents, are your young ones able to explain why we do or don't do certain things? Do you know how your children really feel about Jehovah's standards? Are they obedient simply to avoid making you mad? If so, will that truly be enough? Encourage your young ones to prove to themselves why Jehovah's standards are wise. Help them to see how they can explain their choice to live by Jehovah's standards. Teach them how to resist pressure to follow the world.
In case you've been wondering why I call David Schaefer Budget Shatner, well, here's a perfect example.
Are your young ones able to explain why we do or don't do certain things?
Are your young ones able to explain why they do or don't do certain things? It's such an irritating, cheesy way of talking, and I know that David Schaefer's mannerisms and the way he talks are way, way down on the list of things that we need to be commenting on in this particular talk, but it really does grate. I think it would grate as a Jehovah's Witness, having to sit through this talk and having to put up with this uneven way of talking where sometimes he's saying individual words or parts of a sentence very slowly, and then he speeds up to this insane speed where you can barely separate the words from each other. Anyway, I suppose we should get back to the commentary. And what we've essentially had here is reminding parents of the need to indoctrinate their children to have these hateful, bigoted views. Not just have them, but promote them in the school classroom. Shove them down the throats of anyone who will indulge them or question them. We've also had him single out for praise an incredibly disingenuous response to the question, why is it such a problem for someone to be gay?
And did you appreciate how she subtly showed that Jehovah's standards benefit both the individual and the community? As examples, she highlighted the avoidance of drug abuse and theft, values she knew her teacher would appreciate.
It benefits the community for someone to not be gay. Just saying that sounds bonkers, doesn't it? It benefits the community for someone to not be attracted to the same sex in just the same way as it benefits the community for someone to not take drugs, not be violent, and not steal. And this is apparently a great argument, such a great argument, that it is the approved response in this situation, a response that's given praise here by David Schaefer.